Welcome to the 81st episode of I Wrote This News. Today is Wednesday, March 30th, 2022. Here's your Hump Day news. Story number 1, your jumpsuit matches your spray tan, Mr. Ex-President. A federal judge said Monday that then-President Donald Trump, quote, more likely than not committed federal crimes in trying to obstruct the congressional count of Electoral College votes on January 6th of last year. The determination from U.S. District Court Judge David Carter came in a ruling addressing scores of sensitive emails that Trump ally and conservative lawyer John Eastman had resisted turning over to the House Select Committee investigating the January 6th riot and related efforts to overturn the 2020 presidential election result. Eastman wrote key legal memos aimed at denying Democrat Joe Biden's victory. The judge was assessing whether Eastman's communications were protected by attorney-client privilege and was analyzing in part whether Eastman, Trump, and others had consulted about the commission of a crime. Attorney-client privilege doesn't cover situations in which both the client and the attorney are engaged in criminal conduct. Based on the evidence, the court finds it more likely than not that President Trump corruptly attempted to obstruct the joint session of Congress on January 6, 2021, wrote Carter. Trump spokesman Taylor Buttigieg called the ruling absurd and baseless and said it was an example of, quote, how the left is weaponizing every branch of government against President Trump. But even Trump's partner in more likely than not crime noted that this was a possibility. About 3 weeks ago, Eastman stated in a filing to the court that, quote, were this court to sustain the defendant's claims, it may be the first formal finding of presidential criminality by a federal court in United States history. The bottom line is that after having lost a legitimate election and then having come up dry in repeated attempts to prove election fraud before several courts across the country, Team Trump cooked up a plan to overturn the election that had no legal basis. A law and order president, indeed. Story number 2, tanks for nuttin. President Biden is defending controversial remarks he made over the weekend in which he appeared to call for regime change in Russia. Off-script comments that were quickly walked back by his administration. But Biden walked back the walking back in comments before reporters on Monday, saying, quote, I was expressing the moral outrage that I feel, and I make no apologies for it. Over the weekend, actor and walking steroid Sean Penn attempted to browbeat the Academy of Motion Pictures into giving Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky a slot at the Oscars on Sunday night. Penn threatened to smelt his statuettes unless Zelensky was allowed to make a speech. The Academy demurred. In the meantime, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is leading his country to fight back against enormous odds, dodging assassination attempts and deep-fake videos claiming he'd surrendered to Russia, negotiating with Qatar to increase their oil production, giving interviews to independent Russian journalists in an attempt to get his message to everyday Russians, and whose negotiators appear to have been poisoned during peace talks with Russia. So, what we have here is what we have always had, powerful white dudes mansplaining moral outrage and putting themselves in the spotlight. Even Will Smith got in on the action at the Oscars, losing his temper and slapping Chris Rock over a bad joke about Smith's wife. The result, the headlines zeroed in on Smith, taking attention away from the accomplishments of those honored at the awards ceremony. Guys, here's my suggestion, step up to actually help, or sit down and keep your feelings to yourself. March 30th is the 89th day of the year on the Gregorian calendar. 276 days remain until the end of the year. Now it's time for On This Date in History. On this date in 1822, the Florida Territory is created in the United States. 1842, ether anesthesia is used for the first time, in an operation by the American surgeon Dr. Crawford Long. 1855, border ruffians from Missouri invade Kansas and force election of a pro-slavery legislature. When territorial elections were held in Kansas, bands of armed border ruffians from Missouri seized polling places, prevented free state men from voting, and cast votes themselves illegally, since they were Missourians. The goal was to make slavery legal in Kansas. To read more on this dark but fascinating chapter in American history, search Wikipedia for, quote, border ruffians. 1867, Alaska is purchased from Russia for $7.2 million, or about 2 cents per acre by United States Secretary of State William H. Seward. 1981, U.S. President Ronald Reagan is shot in the chest outside a Washington, D.C. hotel by John Hinckley, Jr. 3 others are wounded in the same incident. 2017, SpaceX conducts the world's first reflight of an orbital-class rocket. Celebrating birthdays today are actor Warren Beatty, musician Eric Clapton, comedian Paul Reiser, rapper MC Hammer, singer Tracy Chapman, journalist and blowhole Piers Morgan, singer Celine Dion, and actor John Astin. He turns 92 years old today. Happy birthday to all of them, and if your birthday is today, a very happy birthday to you as well. By the way, if you or someone you know is having a birthday and would like us to announce it on the show, leave us a voice message or send an email. The links are in the show notes. Today's news was brought to us by the Washington Post, Yahoo News, NPR, CNN, the New York Times, the Associated Press, Wall Street Journal, Deadline, and the Volodymyr Zelensky of informational websites, Wikipedia. If you have a comment or a question about anything you've heard today, or if you have a suggestion, please send us a note at IWTN, all one word, at thatradioshow.com. That email address one more time is IWTN, all one word, at thatradioshow.com.
One more thing, if this podcast sounds a little funny, that's because it's also an experiment. All of the vocals were generated using AI technology. Hopefully the show will sound different and better as the tech improves and as we improve at using it. I'm Bob Neese, hoping you have an amazing day. We'll get together again soon.